Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, friends. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your practice. I hope this finds you in good health and secure. We're going to continue with the Lankavatara. And in my videos, I've been putting up videos, podcasts every day pretty steadily for a while now with an occasional skip. I have some work I'm performing for Ms. Sandra, my patron here. I'm going to be re-roofing her garage. I had doctor's appointments yesterday. So I'm having some interruptions. So if you don't see a posting every day, or if there's a couple of days skipped, I hope that you'll be patient with me and understand that I do have other responsibilities, none of which takes priority in my life over this resource for our Buddhist practice, but it does require my time to maintain the sponsorship I have, or the support that I have from this patron. Keeps a roof over my head, so on and so forth. So anyway, so glad you're here. Please don't forget to like, subscribe to grow this Sangha. And as always, to our patrons who are able to support financially with donations through Patreon or directly through PayPal. You guys are incredibly awesome. Thank you for extending your support. All right, so we're about halfway just about here. And we are dealing with a bodhisattva who is struggling somewhat with understanding the Mahayana concept of a mind of enlightenment as distinct from a mind of ego that is of association, identification with everything seen as other, whereas we have the mind, potential mind that we are invoking in our practice of Buddhism to see the equanimity of everything. We don't annihilate, we don't get rid of, we don't quit anything. We reposition our existence as a witness of this existence, thereby releasing or letting go of our deeply felt unconscious as well as conscious attachment, identifying this illusion of support of being by virtue of other stuff buoying up a self. See, that's where the suffering exists. Because if you think every moment of every day that your existence is completely dependent upon the stuff around you, others around you, then you're not in control of your life. You're basically existing by the favor of your possessions. Do you see? And the truth is, even in the words, that's an illusion. That what you end up relinquishing of your experience of life is that it's yours. You're allowing all of the stuff of life, environment of life, to possess you as though on a whim, if it decides, then you're gone. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's in essence what we're doing. So Shakyamuni is suggesting that if you contemplate the true nature of things, you will understand that it's really the other way around, so to speak. And this is where the words get confusing. But really, everything that you've identified since your mind became sentient, or that your sentience, your mind instantiated, right? Everything that you've identified is your doing, your mind's doing. And so really it is everything that is dependent upon your mind. This is what is meant by mind only. Makes sense, right? That's not to say that if your mind stops thinking it, everything will disappear. No. That's a very popular misunderstanding and goes way back, right? This is where nihilism... Anyway, that's just not the point. The point is, watch how the mind works. That when in your mind, you become aware that your identity is a constructed thing, then there's no reason to feel as though your very existence is a slave to or dependent upon all of this other stuff. That everything, every molecule and atom in the universe is doing exactly as you are doing every single moment, expressing potential. So that puts everybody, everything, every atom on an even playing field. Equanimity. And so now you don't need to stress. I don't possess it. I am not possessed. I am in this. At a level I'd never considered before. Buddha-ness. Okay? Incredible simplification. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just saying it is, with words, how to wrap our minds around this, yes? So Shakyamuni is going to continue. He's talking to Mahamati, and he says, further, Mahamati, I will explain what characterizes the self-nature of the skandhas. So if you need to decode that again, the characteristics are, right, we talk about the 10 factors of life, appearance, nature, karma, so on and so forth. Every Gangyo, we repeat these at the end of the second chapter, right? And the skandhas, these arising consciousnesses from these functions of human life that arise or instantiate or emerge a sentience, a sentient mind. Yeah? Mahamati, what are the 5 skandhas? They are form, sensation, thought, confirmation, and consciousness. Right? Those are the 5 skandhas with which we do all that busy work of identifying to create the straw man self. Right? Mahamati, 4 of these have no material forms. Sensation, thought, confirmation, and consciousness, they're emergent properties, emergent processes. Yes? Form, Mahamati, belongs to what is made of the 4 primary elements. These elements differ from one another in their individual signs, but the 4 skandhas that are without form cannot be reckoned as 4. They are like space, right? They are always this reference to space. They're empty. They're processes, right? And you could say, if you extend that a little further, that if you understand the entire universe as a process that you're witnessing, there you are. For instance, Mahamati, space cannot be numbered, and it is due to our discrimination, identification, that it is designated as such. See, all these words are trying to surround these processes, but they're just doing what they do. In the same way, Mahamati, the skandhas that are beyond calculability, innumerous, as they have no number marks. How many times have you conscienced? How many times have you, boy, the throat today, are not to be predicated as existing and not existing. And they are beyond the four propositions, but to the, being and non-being, thus bothness and not bothness. But to the ignorant, they are described as subject to numeration, but not so to the wise. Right? So those processes that the ignorant would say, I don't know how they would say it, but he's simply identifying that how many sensations or thoughts or confirmations or consciousnesses have you had in a day, in a moment, in the last 5 minutes? It's not quantifiable because it's just the way the process of cognition works, perception works, experience. Experience isn't, it's a moment-to-moment process, right? It's not quantifiable. Those who don't understand might try to quantify it or label it with numbers and so forth, but it doesn't take a whole lot of wisdom or insight to understand, you can't do that. Again, Mahamati, by the wise, the five skandhas are regarded as thought constructions, devoid of dualities such as otherness and non-otherness, for they are like varieties of forms and objects in a vision, like images and persons in a dream, as they have no better substance for their support, and better being a supporting structure or a priori, right? And as they obstruct the passage of noble wisdom, there is what is known as the skandha discrimination. This, Mahamati, is what characterizes the self-nature of the skandhas. This discrimination must be discarded by you. So he's pointing out to Mahamati that part of his difficulty in understanding Mahayana is that he's taking what he sees or what he hears or even what he thinks or smells or tastes or feels. He's taking that sensory input, and that is what he's using to permanentize, identify, and distinguish, discriminate, and identify with. He's walking Mahamati through he's been teaching this for years and years, and people still aren't getting it. That the skandhas themselves are constructions. They're the facilities for identifying. The mind emerges beyond those, but those are the inputs to the samsaric identity, the skandhas. You see? And having discarded this, you should declare the truth of solitude. So if you can let go these, and you would think Mahamati would know this by now, but Shakyamuni is reiterating, maybe simplifying, or recapping what a Sravaka and a Pratyeka Buddha should be fully aware of. But he's pointing out, Mahamadi, this is where you're stumbling. Keeping back the views held by the philosophers, the truth of solitude is to be announced in all the Buddha assemblies, Mahamadi, and thereby the teaching of the egolessness of things is purified, and you will enter upon the stage of fargoing. So you'll be much closer to arriving at Buddha-ness. The reason you're stuck with the philosophers, the egos, is that you're thingifying everything, and you're using your skandhas, your perceptive, cognitive, associative functions, to admire yourself in all of this identification. You have to stop doing that. And then and only then will you perceive this much deeper, much more profound witnessing of the process. Until you do that, that process, that Buddha-ness, is completely obscured from vision because you're so busy identifying stuff, hanging on to it. The stuff's not going to go away. Relax. What you need to identify is your skandhas, you're clinging, you're hanging on to. That's what needs to go. Entering upon the stage of Durangama, you will become the master of many samadhis, and attaining the will body, you will realize the samadhi known as Mayopama, or Maya-like. Thoroughly conversant with the powers, psychic faculties, and self-control, you will be the supporter of all beings like the earth. Mahamadi, as the great earth is the supporter of all beings, so is the Bodhisattva Mahasattva the supporter of all beings. Wow, that's a powerful visual. Further, Mahamadi, there are 4 kinds of nirvana. What are the 4? They are 1, the nirvana which is attained when the self-nature of all things is seen as non-entity. So nirvana is basically a word that indicates a huge mental revolution, a huge epiphany. I mean, an aha moment of the highest grandeur, yes? This life-altering realization. This is of my own making. This doesn't exist the way I experience it. I am not dependent on it. It is fully dependent on me. It exists, but my attitude, my idea, my mental fabrications about it are all mine. Right? And this is the aloneness that Shakyamuni talks about, is that once you realize what is the process of all things manifesting is, that there's a release. I don't own, I am not owned by. Identification weakens substantially because your identification no longer requires all the identified in order for you to have a place. And that may make you feel quite untethered. That kind of aloneness. And that could be very unsettling until you apply your Buddha wisdom and understand that that doesn't negate you or anything you've identified. It simply releases you from the bondage of ownership, possession, grasping. Now you live free. You live at will. I hope I'm making that clear. So that's the first nirvana. The second nirvana, which is attained when varieties of individual marks characterizing all things are seen as non-entities. So first there's a release that happens. Secondly, there's a fascination, if you will, of watching the process in all of its variety. It's quite astounding now that you're not responsible for it, right? That you're just witnessing it. Third nirvana, which is attained when there is the recognition of non-existence of a being endowed with its own specific attributes. All right, all these distinguishing marks that I use to discriminate amongst everything. That's at the core of identification, isn't it? Because how can you identify something if there's nothing identified or an identifier? That relationship is all constructed. So it's not a denial of anything. It's I almost said revulsion. Because it sounds like reversing. It's a reversing of this relationship processing of samsara. That if I am this, there must be that, and therefore that makes it so that I can be this, right? That whole matrix becomes obvious. And that's quite shattering when you really, really realize it, yes? So fourth, the nirvana, which is attained when there takes place the severance of the bondage conditioning, the continuation of individuality and generality of the skandhas. And so ultimately, the skandhas, these mechanisms of discrimination and identification, are the mechanisms from which the ego arises. So what he's describing here are gradual explosions of the bondage that creates the ego in the first place. Mahamati, these four views of nirvana belong to the philosophers and are not my teaching. According to my teaching, Mahamati, the getting rid of the discriminating manovijnana, this is said to be nirvana. That's interesting. So using Mahamati's rudimentary understanding of Buddhahood and trying to attain it, he's using what the philosophers have termed, as we've been talking, about our physical properties and our identification. And kind of confusingly, the last one where he's talking about breaking apart the skandhas, I assumed he was talking about the destruction of the ego, but what he's now saying is that this position of the philosophers is indicating a superior ego that has gotten rid of these skandhas, these consciousness processings. Like there's a different... See, I can't even think that way anymore. But I think this is why there's this counterpoint. And I have to, again, default to the fact that this is a translation and it may be poorly done. Because there's kind of a fly in the ointment there, right? This isn't a smooth transition. So, but in retrospect, as I read it, I'm the one who came up with the word ego in that scenario, because we're Lotus Sutra practitioners, so we understand what the goal is here. But obviously, this is a confusing point here. So I sympathize with Mahamati at this point. Mahamati then retorts, does not the emancipated one establish 8 vijnanas, 8 consciousnesses? And the emancipated one replies, I do, Mahamati. Mahamati says, well, if 8 Vijnanas are established, why do you refer to the getting rid of the Mano Vijnana and not of the 7 other Vijnanas as well? And so the emancipated one says, with the Mano Vijnana as cause and supporter, Mahamati, there rise the 7 Vijnanas. Okay, so I have a discussion on the 9 consciousnesses, several of them actually, and you can look them up on the homepage of this channel, right? Several videos, several podcasts about the 9 consciousnesses. And so what is being discussed at the moment in the Lankavatara is the order of events, and it's kind of the reverse of the Nidana. The Nidana proposes a perturbation of energy and its gradual precipitation into name and form and birth and so forth, right? Whereas the reading of the consciousnesses here, and the one that is being discussed the most between Mahamati and Shakyamuni here, is the 8th consciousness. Again, there's no 9th consciousness yet in the teachings of Mahayana at this point, certainly in this translation of the Lankavatara. So when he indicates the Mano Vijnana, of which there are 2, but we'll take it as read here as he's talking about the eighth one. Mahamati is saying, well, you got 8 consciousnesses, so why is it specifically the 8th one? The 7th one. The 8th one is the alaya, right? The 7th one that you're destroying. So with that piece of information, we can go back and reread the way he dissected the skandhas, right? I went all the way back to the alaya, which is karmic, but he's staying within the manifestations of samsaric mind, the mano vijnanas. So my fault there. Getting rid of the mano vijnana and not of the other 7. Good question from Mahamati. What Shakyamuni says is because of the mano vijnana as the cause and supporter of the other 7. So he's saying that 7th and 6th consciousness, the mano vijnana, are the formations of these skandhas, are the formations from the karma of the 8th consciousness, the alaya consciousness, are these mental constructs of identification, which, as necessitates identification, manifests the seeing consciousness, oral consciousness, feeling consciousness, smell, taste, all of the other consciousnesses from 6, 5, 4 through, right? The 5 and the mental cognitions all arise from the energy of wanting to be, or instantiation, or manifestation from the karmic engine. That mano vijnana is the supporter of, the instigator of the lower 6. Does it make sense now? Makes better sense to me. So he's going slower than I thought he was, but he's slowly deconstructing the mind of samsara for Mahamati, right? Again, Mahamati, the mano vijnana is kept functioning as it discerns a world of objects and becomes attached to it, and by means of manifold habit energy or memory, or I don't think memory is a good enough term there. Habit energy, this constant instantiation of the same potentials, tendencies, and conditions, yes? It nourishes the alaya vijnana. So there's the 8th consciousness. It gets influenced by this whole mechanism of identification. So it's a back and forth. It feeds on itself. The manas is evolved along with the notion of an ego and its belongings to which it clings and on which it reflects. So there's that two-sided equation I was referring to earlier, right? That as much as our minds identify an exterior, an other in myriad form, at the very same moment, we supplicate ourselves to that possession. We basically say, I am me because you are you, to everything, not just people, but earth, dirt, trees, light, camera. And whether we realize it or mostly not, what we're really saying is, I owe my existence to this stuff. It's no wonder that that's what Buddha identified as leading to suffering. Because now you're under tremendous duress constantly of your very existence by virtue of what you own or are owned by. The manas is evolved along with the notion of an ego and its belongings to which it clings on and on which it reflects. It has no body of its own, right? This relationship, nor its own marks. The alaya vijnana is its cause and support. Because the world, which is the mind itself, is imagined real and attached to as such, the whole psychic system evolves mutually conditioning. Like the waves of the ocean, Mahamati, the world which is the mind manifested, is stirred up by the wind of objectivity. It evolves and dissolves. Thus, Mahamati, when the mano vijnana is got rid of, the 7 vijnanas are also got rid of. Right? If you don't have a mind of distinguishing identification, then all of the tools of distinguishing identifications evaporate. I enter not into nirvana by means of being, of work, of individual signs. I enter into nirvana when the vijnana, which is caused by discrimination, ceases. With it, the mano vijnana, for its cause and support, the manas secures its use. The vijnana causes the citta to function and is supported by it. Like a great flood where no waves are stirred because of its being dried up, the vijnana system in its various forms ceases to work when there is the annihilation of the mano vijnana. Annihilation, you have to understand here, means the severing, not the annihilation so much as the annihilation of the attachment. Again, poorly translated. Where are we time-wise? Oh, we're doing good. We'll go a little further. Mahamati, I will tell you about the various features of the false imagination. And when you and the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas are well acquainted with each of them in its specific form, you will get away from discrimination and seeing well and knowing the way of inner realization by noble wisdom, and also the ways of speculation by the philosophers. You will cast off discrimination such as grasped and grasping, and will not be induced to discriminate in respect to the multiple aspects of relativity knowledge, as well as the forms of false imagination. What are the various features of the false imagination, Mahamati? They are the discrimination as regards words, meaning, individual marks, property, self-nature, cause, philosophical views, reasoning, birth, no birth, dependence, and bondage and emancipation. These Mahamadi are the various features of the false imagination. So again, the words are tricky here. You understand each of these concepts. We've discussed them, right? But again, I have to caution the understanding here is that it's not these features specifically. It is our relation to these features and how we adhere and construct a self, an ego, an individual from these apparatus. It's important to remember, because if you don't remember that, these will all seem again like things. And then you'll be, and this is what he's pointing out, like the philosophers, you'll be attached to these things as being real and entities in and of themselves. You will be possessed by the words when you give the words the power of being an entity or forming what you think you see. Because you use words, the words enable you to instantiate those things. That's all wrong. And we've already seen that in Mahamadi, yeah? And it was really obvious when he said, well, things exist because we have words for them. I mean, that seems so juvenile, right? And saying the reverse is no less correct, no less wrong. Right? To say things exist because we have made words for them is equally wrong. Words are just, they're effluvient ideas, concepts of relations, of ownership. Right? Namarupa. If I don't have a name for it, does it truly exist? Well, you're witnessing it and experiencing it, but your insatiable desire to possess, to own something in order, and remember, everything we try to own is a reflection of ourselves. So the ownership of things is powerful because to own it means that I exist. See that? Back and forth. Now, Mahamadi, what is the discrimination of words? Well, that is the becoming attached to various sweet voices and singing. This is the discrimination as regards words. It's a romantic idea of, oh, wow, we can communicate our relationship to stuff. What is the discrimination of meaning? It is the discrimination by which one imagines that words rise depending on whatever subjects they express, and which subjects one regards as self-existent and belonging to the realization of noble wisdom. He's really talking about the meaning of words rather than the meaning of the discussion. So we have to discern. Again, translation may be a problem here, but you get it, right? What is the discrimination of individual marks? That's easy. It is to imagine in whatever is denoted by words the multitudinous of individual marks which are like a mirage and clinging tenaciously to them. No, that is blue. It is blue. It's always been blue. It always will be blue. What is being blue? That question we never ask. Who is making it so? What is blue? But if you're stuck on words, those questions never arise, right? To discriminate all things according to these categories: warmth, fluidity, motility, and solidity. What is the discrimination of property? Well, we talk about that all the time, right? It is to desire a state of wealth, such as gold, silver, and various precious stones, possessions. Yeah? And by virtue of our possessing them, we give them value. And that value changes over time. Goes up, goes down. It's all artificial, isn't it? What is the discrimination of self-nature? It is to make discrimination according to the imaginary views of the philosophers in reference to the self-nature of all things, which they stoutly maintain, saying, quote, "This is just it, and there is no other." They talk about things, or we talk about things, thingness, as though itself is an extant entity, a self. We talk about chair like chair is permanent. And what we're implying, and what Shakyamuni is pointing out is that we're talking about chair like it's been here since the Big Bang. Or not Big Bang, whatever. I don't want to... Everything's in such a state of flux anymore, right? It's kind of hilarious that we have to point that out. The beginning of the universe. Like there was this element called chair. What is the discrimination of cause? That is, to distinguish the notion of causation in reference to being and non-being, and to imagine that there are cause signs. This is the discrimination of cause. Oh, that's an unhealthy omen. Oh, that means this is going to happen. All of that is the matrix of possessor and possessed, yes? This clinging thing. What is the discrimination of philosophical views? That means getting attached to the philosophers' wrong views and discriminations concerning such notions as being and non-being, oneness and otherness, bothness and not bothness. Right? This, again, it's the relationship. If we create something with words, cognitions, senses, we do so in order to identify self. Ego. It's a self-fulfilling activity. As though without it being defined and discriminated, I cannot exist. That is the primary fallacy of human samsaric existence, in a nutshell. What is the discrimination of reasoning? It means the teaching whose reasoning is based on the grasping of the notion of an ego substance and what belongs to it. And we can go everywhere from what is a soul, which is completely antithetical to this wisdom that we're cultivating, yes, to just possessions, right? Ownership. What is the discrimination of birth? It means getting attached to the notion that all things come into existence and go out of it according to causation. This one's a little more difficult to grasp. It's a release of the process as the process. All phenomena grows from tendencies and conditions which themselves grow or go through formation from root actions, works, perturbances in energy. That somehow the philosopher, the religionists, the people who want to assign identity want to intervene at that point and say there's either somebody running that, selecting, oh, I'm making a Joan, and it starts the process, kicks it off, right? That's really popular. Or the idea that somehow the birth is caused by the the result that Marquita wants to be, so she creates a birth. There's all kinds of ways of mentally manipulating these pseudosciences into establishing a cause for birth. But what Shakyamuni is saying is, no, there's a process we call life. And it starts with energy, indiscriminate energy, quiescent energy, being, what's the word I have on the charts? I should post that, actually. I've been saying perturbation, but any kind of friction, you name it. Try to discern from Julius Evola's book on the Nidana, that spark, that initial rub, static, whatever, that excitation. That's the first indication that energy is now going to form. Based on what? Based on potential, possibility. It has no direction set. It sets direction by virtue of just the process of doing what it does. It's like water flowing down a river and then running into a bunch of rocks. The rapids didn't create the rapids. The rapids are a result of just the process of the water flowing and running into resistance from the rocks. Now, when we see that, we identify it, give it characteristics, sound, appearance, rocks, speed, all of that. But that's us doing that. It's just doing what it does. There's no birth of the rapids. That's something we impose on it. Do you see? I hope that helped. What is the discrimination of dependence? That should be easy. It means the mutual dependence of gold and the filament, which is made of gold. Yeah, that's... Because he uses the word gold, it can be confusing, but he's still simply pointing to the same nature that what we identify as ourselves in everything. It's a back and forth that's an illusion that we create in order to build an identity, yes? What is the discrimination of bondage and emancipation? It is like imagining that there is something bound because of something binding, as in the case of a man who, by the help of a cord, ties a knot or loosens it. Yeah, that's the relationship building that we do when we identify, right? These Mahamadi are the various features of the false imagination to which all the ignorant and simple-minded ones cling, imagining that things are or are not. Those attached to the notion of relativity are attached to the notion of multitudinous of things rising from the false imagination. It is like seeing varieties of objects depending on Maya. But these varieties, thus revealing themselves, are discriminated by the ignorant as something other than Maya itself, according to their way of thinking. Now, Mati, Maya and varieties of objects are neither different nor one. If they were different, varieties of objects would not have Maya for their cause. If Maya were one with the varieties of objects, there would be no distinction between the two. But as there is to distinguish these two, Maya and varieties of objects are neither one nor different. For this reason, you and the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas should never give yourselves up to the notions of being and non-being. And now he's going to go into verse, but I've gone on long enough for today. So this is where we'll continue in the next one. Okay? I know I can hear some of you saying, boy, that's a lot of word salad. Yes, it is. And I'm hoping, confoundingly, by adding my own word salad, that we can navigate some insights in this, because this is all we're after. We're trying to grasp at these the nature of the mind and how to dissect the way we trip ourselves every day, right? Of course, as Lotus Sutra practitioners, we know all we need do is readjust our mind, rededicate our mind, Namu, to Myoho Renge Kyo. Simply invoke the Buddha-ness in our mind, and the trickle effect, if you will permeate all of our identification processes, and they will just, like bubbles in a bubble bath, they'll slowly just pop away, right? We know this. At the time of the Lankavatara, not so much. But I think, and you tell me what your thinking is on this in the comments, but I think this is the nature of study, is that knowing what we know, going back and reading and investigating earlier discussions on what we know, all of us experience life in our own unique particular ways, and there may be examples in here, word examples, whatever, that the stories trickle into aspects of our own lives, that our own froth of bubble bath, that there are certain bubbles that are kind of unique, and if we pop those, then we all get personal little insights and maybe big epiphanies. So that's the nature of study. We're doing it together. We're all friends here. The point is, keep your practice strong. You will achieve results. You are achieving results. And I appreciate you deeply for it. Stick with it, and I'll see you in the next one. All right. Take care. Be kind to yourself, and I'll see you again. Bye for now.